Hey everybody, welcome to Obscurities in Miniature. Today is Friday, which means it's time for our Obscurities in Literature. Now, this book may not be the most obscure thing. Maybe you're familiar with it, maybe you aren't, but that's half the fun of doing this, is to educate and illuminate as many people as I possibly can. So, Adrian Smith, we all know, is a well-known fantasy artist. Got his big break doing work for Games Workshop, obviously. That's where he made his most impact. Did a lot of other stuff for Target Games and a couple other companies off the top of my head. But this book specifically is an interesting one because it's based on the board game, the Chronicles of Hate, I believe it was called officially, from Cool Mini. But before they made the board game, it was actually a comic book. And as far as I know, and I could be wrong, so if you guys want to re-educate me, by all means, please do. Adrian Smith hasn't done a whole lot of comic book interior art. Now, as far as I know, besides the Chronicles of Hate, this is one of the only books he's done. Bros, I don't even know. It's French, but interestingly enough, it's written by Pat Mills, who, if you are an astute comic fan, probably recognize that name as one of the main guys who is behind 2000 AD. And I know it was a big lifelong dream of his to break into the French market, so it's interesting that he went ahead and did this with Adrian Smith. And like I said, this is one of the few instances that I can think of where you will find Smith's art outside of, the typical fantasy games. Obviously, it's not in English. I don't know if it was ever published in English either. Having, Mills write it makes me wonder if perhaps it was actually ever in 2000 AD. If you are a regular reader, maybe you can educate me on that. But, you can see it's very much pure Adrian Smith art. And funny enough, as far as I was aware, the first foray that Mills himself had made into the French market was with stuff like Solane's Book of Invasions and good old Requiem, which absolutely is not really appropriate for me to get into, but that's not what we're here to talk about. Today we're going to talk about the art of hate. So, what's interesting about this is there was a lot of work that actually went into this book during the Kickstarter. The game was a Kickstarter, obviously, with Cool Mini, but it had a lot of content that was drawn by Smith, as well as a little bit of, background knowledge on a lot of the stuff, but it has a ton of extra art in here. And one thing that I'm pretty familiar with is that there's not a whole lot of collected art editions of Adrian Smith at this point in time. And the man has had a pretty prolific career. Unfortunately, it just doesn't get enough recognition. Now, first things first, I want to point out this is over 250 pages. That's one of the biggest art books that Cool Mini has put out in conjunction with any Kickstarter I believe they've done before or since. I know they did one for Trudvang, but I don't know if it's going to be completely original art or what. You have all the different tribes, and the cool thing is you get a lot of actual sketch work along with the finished pieces as well. And some of this stuff, having followed Smith's web pages and seen a lot of this stuff online prior to the release of the actual graphic novel Hate, it's interesting to see the beginnings of a lot of this stuff. And for the most part, the book itself is in black and white. Now, here's what we're going to get to. Every tribe, besides having some cool custom, early sketches and stuff, has a cool little, 6 to 10 page origin story. And like I said, all of these were on the Kickstarter when it was in the process of funding. But yeah, as far as I know, this is the only way to get a hold of any of this stuff. There is no other collected edition. I guess I was wrong. There is some color in work in here. Of course, most of the tribes look the same, so it's going to be hard telling them apart in terms of paint schemes. Just skip through. And like I said, I haven't seen some of these, pencil sketches in here even. But yeah, so just an absolutely huge tome filled with artwork. And if you're like me and you appreciate where a lot of this artwork comes from, it's quite cool to have this on your shelf. To me, this is probably, of all the various art books that Cool Mini's put out, probably my number one favorite one. And not just because It has a lot of that collected artwork, but just the early sketches, the little short story vignettes that they've got going on in here. There's just a lot to the book, and it's quite big. So I know every now and then you see these online for somewhat reasonable prices. If you're even remotely interested in Smith's art, I would say go ahead and try to track one down, because you won't be disappointed. I'm obviously skipping around. I don't want to spoil everything for you. My favorite tribe. Honestly, this is one game that I really would like to get to the table. I've heard it described as a Blood Bowl season, except instead of playing football, we're actually going to just have each other, fight to the death. It very much is a ongoing campaign type game. Like I said, some of these I've never even seen myself. It's always fun to pull this book off the shelf, because there's stuff, I remember seeing this one and that one, but some of this this is the only place to see it. And I want to say this guy was originally in the Zombicide Black Plague. I could be wrong. Yeah, there's just a whole lot of content here. So if you're a fan of the game, you're a fan of Adrian Smith's art, if you're a fan of just cool, gritty... I don't think this guy actually has a model. I know, stumbling through this book, I originally had hoped maybe we'll see a second season someday, because there's just a whole lot of neat designs in here. It's not like... I think they're going to be able to not talk Adrian Smith into drawing even more crazy monster stuff. So yeah, a very interesting book from a very talented artist. And if you're even remotely interested, like I said, do take a look for it, because it's going to be a hard one to find. As far as I know, it was only offered in the original Kickstarter. It was not offered, I think, during their Time Machine one. And honestly, these books become very hard to find unless it's just like people have a surplus of them sitting around. There is the book for the others from Cool Mini as well that has a lot of Smith art. And that one actually has a lot of the short stories that were in the Kickstarter campaign as well. And that one actually is a pretty cool book too. Anyway, hopefully this has been of some interest to you, and hopefully we will be back next week with even more Obscurities in literature. This has been High Lord Tamerlane with Obscurities in miniature and literature. Saying see you later. Hopefully we'll see you back here soon. Bye-bye.